The relay called Far Lantern had been dark for 19 hours when the signal tender named Osu Marsh first understood that no one in the galaxy was going to answer. She had counted the silence the way her people counted everything, in slow, careful breaths, because the Velo had no eyes worth the name and lived by sound and by signal the way warmer species lived by light. For 19 hours she had pressed the old listening cone to the side of her head and sent the distress note out across every band the relay still held, and for 19 hours the only thing that had come back was the hiss of a sky going quiet. That was the thing the warmer species never understood about the dark spreading toward them. It did not roar, it did not burn, it came as silence, and silence was a thing the Velo could feel in their bones before anything else alive even noticed it had arrived. Far Lantern was not a warship. It had never been a warship. It was a listening post and a way station, a knot of old iron tied to the inner lip of a dead spiral arm, and clustered around it now were 41 refugee ships, full of people who had run from the same thing she had. 80,000 souls, give or take the dying, none of them armed, all of them waiting. They were waiting for the morn. Osu had been a child the first time she heard the word, and she had not understood it then. The morn was not an army. It was not a fleet. It was a thing that had been moving through the old systems for longer than her people had kept records, and where it passed, the sky simply stopped. Light stopped reaching. Signal stopped carrying. Worlds that fell inside its edge were not destroyed in any way a body could point to. They were hollowed. They went quiet, and the quiet stayed, and nothing ever came out of it again. The species who ruled behind that silence called themselves the Sable Quorum, and they did not negotiate, because negotiation required two voices, and the morn was building a galaxy with only one. Osu pressed the cone harder to her head and sent the note again. 41 ships. 80,000. Position fixed at the Far Lantern relay. We are not armed. We are not a threat. Is anyone listening? The hiss came back. Only the hiss. Behind her, in the cramped signal deck of the relay, the old keeper named Bren Tallow shifted his weight and made the soft clicking sound her people made instead of a sigh. He was the oldest Velo she had ever met, 300 seasons if he was a day, and he had kept Far Lantern lit for most of them. He had seen the morn take the Sephron worlds. He had seen it take the Halu drift. He had a saying for the silence, the way old keepers always did. When the sky goes quiet, he said, you stop praying for thunder. You make peace with the dark. Osu did not want to make peace with the dark. She was young, by Velo reckoning, only 40 seasons, and she had a younger sister asleep in the third refugee hull, and a mother she had not been able to reach in 11 days, and she did not have the smooth resignation that came to her people late in life. She had spent 19 hours refusing the dark, and she meant to spend 19 more. So she sent the note again, and the edge of the morn crept 800 kilometers closer, with every hour, a wall of stopped sky that did not glow, and did not move fast, and did not need to, because it had never once been turned back. Once, in the 10th hour, her sister Lara had come up from the third refugee hull to sit beside her in the cramped signal deck. Lara was 11 seasons younger than Osu, and had not yet learned to hide what she felt, and so she had simply pressed her small head against Osu's side and asked the only question the whole cluster was asking. Will it hurt, she had said, when it reaches us? Osu had not lied to her. Her people did not lie to children, because a child who could not trust your voice had nothing left to trust. No, she had told her, it will not hurt. The morn does not burn. You will simply stop being able to hear, and then you will stop being able to call, and then the dark will be where you were. That is why I am not going to let it reach us. That is why I am going to keep calling until someone answers. Lara had listened to that the way children listen, taking it in whole, and then she had gone back down to the third hull to sit with the others, and she had told them what her sister had said, that Osu was going to keep calling, and the small terrified children of the cluster had held on to that, the way you hold on to a railing in the dark. There were 9,000 children in the cluster. Osu had counted them, in the third hour, because counting was the thing her people did instead of weeping, and because she wanted to know exactly what she was refusing to let go quiet. 9,000 children, and 40,000 who tended them, and 30,000 more who were old or sick, or simply too tired from running to do anything but wait. 80,000, give or take the dying, and every one of them listening to her band, because she was the keeper, and the keeper's voice was the last thing in the cluster that had not yet gone silent. At the 20th hour, the first of the 41 ships went silent. It was the small one, the Dren tender that had limped in 2 days ago carrying 900 farmers from a moon Osu had never seen. It was on the far edge of the cluster, closest to the advancing wall, and one moment, its signal was a thin, steady pulse on her board, and the next moment, it was not. There was no flash. There was no scream. The pulse simply was not there anymore, and where the ship had been, there was a patch of sky that gave back nothing at all. The morn had touched it, and the ship, and the 900 farmers, and the moon they remembered, had become part of the silence. Osu felt the cold go all the way down through her. On the refugee channel, 80,000 people had felt the same thing she had, that small, terrible vanishing, and the channel filled with the low keening her species made when grief came too fast for words. Brentalo bowed his head. Behind them, the relay's old hull groaned as the edge of stopped sky bent the light around it. She thought about the 900 farmers in the Dren tender, and she made herself not look away from the thought, because that was the keeper's discipline. They had run from a moon she had never seen. They had patched a failing drive and crossed 2 systems on Hope and a half-charged core, and they had reached Far Lantern thinking they had reached safety, and they had been here 2 days, long enough to start to believe they might live, and now they were inside the silence, and the galaxy would never hear them again. She did not know their names. That was the part that sat worst in her. 900 people, and she did not know one of their names, and now there was no one left to ask, because the only people who had known them were inside the dark with them. That was how the morn won. Not by being strong, by being patient, and by teaching the galaxy a lesson so well that the galaxy taught it to itself. The lesson was simple. When the dark comes, do not call for help, because no help comes, and calling only means you die afraid instead of resigned. 100 peoples had learned that lesson. Osu had heard it in every voice that reached Far Lantern in the running years, the flat, dead calm of peoples who had stopped expecting to be answered. They did not call anymore. They drifted. They waited. They went quiet one ship at a time, and the galaxy got a little darker, and the Sable Quorum did not have to lift a hand, because the galaxy had agreed to mourn itself. Osu Marsh had not agreed. That was the only thing that made her different from the 100 peoples before her, and it was a small thing, and it should not have been enough. She did not have a fleet. She did not have a weapon. She had an old relay on a dead arm, and a younger sister in the third hull, and a stubbornness her grandmother had given her, and against the patient dark that had swallowed a galaxy, those were not weapons at all. But she had one thing the 100 peoples had let go of, one thing the Quorum had spent 1,000 years teaching the galaxy to surrender, and she was holding on to it with both her stubborn hands. She had not yet agreed to go quiet. This was how it ended for everyone then. This was how it had ended for the Sephran and the Halu and 100 peoples before them, not in a battle, in a slow, polite vanishing, while they waited for help that the galaxy had long ago stopped sending, because everyone who might have helped had learned the same lesson. You did not fight the morn. You ran from it until you could not run. And then you went quiet, and the silence took you, and the galaxy got a little darker, and no one came. Osu Marsh did not stop sending. She would say later that she did not know why. The note was useless. The bands were empty. The dark was 40 minutes from the next ship in the cluster, but she pressed the cone to her head, and she sent it one more time. The same words, the only words she had. 41 ships, 80,000 souls. We are not armed. Is anyone listening? And then, on a band so far down the spectrum that no living species used it anymore, a band so old the relay only kept it out of habit, something answered. It was not a voice. It was a single tone, low and clean and steady, and it did not say words because it was not meant for words. It was a carrier. A door being knocked on from the other side. Osu had heard 10,000 dead bands in her life, and not one of them had ever done anything but hiss, and this one was singing back at her, a patient, steady pulse that meant only one thing in every signal tongue she knew. Received. Hold. She did not breathe. Brentalo lifted his head, very slowly, the way an old man lifts his head when he is afraid to believe a sound. Then the dead band spoke a second time, And this time it carried words, and the words were in the old trade tongue, slow and careful. The way you speak to someone you have only just learned is still alive. "We heard you," the word said. "We have been listening to this band for a long time. Hold your position. Help is coming." Osu's hands shook so hard she nearly dropped the cone. Help. The word did not fit in her mouth. No one said help in the systems the Morn had touched. Help was a children's word. A word from before. A word for peoples who still believed the galaxy answered when you called. "Who?" she sent back. On the same old band, her signal trembling. "Who is coming? How many ships? How long?" There was a pause, and in that pause Osu understood. In the way her people understood things from the shape of a silence, that whoever was on the other end was deciding how much truth a frightened stranger could carry. Then the answer came, and it was the strangest answer she had ever received, because it was not a number of ships, and it was not a name she knew, and it carried under its calm words a thing she had no signal for, a thing that felt almost like a smile. "One ship is coming first," the word said. "The rest are right behind it. They call us the Free Watch. The first ship is called the Daybreak Verdict. Hold the dark off your people as long as you can. We are coming up out of the deep, and we are coming fast." Osu read the words 3 times. One ship, against the Morn, against the thing that had swallowed 100 peoples without slowing once. One ship. She should have laughed. She should have wept. Instead, she pressed the cone to her head and sent 4 words back across the dead band, the truest words she had, because she did not know yet what was coming, and because for the first time in 19 hours, the silence had a crack in it. "Then please," she sent, "come fast." The thing about the Morn that no one outside the silence systems understood was how slow it was, and how that slowness was the worst part. A fire you could run from. A fleet you could see coming. The Morn came at the pace of a tide, 800 kilometers an hour, never faster, never slower. And that steadiness was a kind of cruelty all its own. It gave you time to count. It gave you time to watch your neighbors go quiet one at a time. It gave you time to do exactly what 80,000 frightened people were doing now, which was to crowd their 40 remaining ships toward the relay and away from the wall, knowing all the while that there was nowhere the wall would not eventually reach. Osu Marsh kept the cone to her head and kept the dead band open and tried to do the keeper's work, which was to give the people something true to hold. "A ship is coming," she sent across the refugee channel. "It is called the Daybreak Verdict. It belongs to a people called the Free Watch. They heard us. They are coming fast." The channel did not believe her. She could hear it in the shape of the silence that came back. They had heard promises before, in other systems, on other dying days, and the promises had never once arrived. An old voice on the second hull, a Velo elder named Hesh, sent back the thing they were all thinking. "One ship, Keeper. You would send one ship against the Morn. We are already dead, and you are reading us a story so we die quiet." Osu did not have an answer for that. She was not sure he was wrong. She turned to Brentalo, the old keeper, and asked him with the small turn of her head that her people used instead of a question. Brentalo was studying the relay's oldest instrument, a slow gravity listener that the warmer species would have called a seismograph if it had been built for a planet. It measured the bend of space the way Osu's cone measured the bend of sound. He had not spoken in several minutes. When he finally did, his voice had changed. "Something is moving in the deep," he said. "Under the arm. Coming up." Osu pressed close to the instrument. The slow listener showed the dark sky as a flat, quiet line, the way it always did. The Morn itself barely registering, because the Morn did not move space, it stopped it. But there, at the very bottom of the trace, where the deep currents ran beneath the spiral arm, something was rising, a single point. And it was not drifting up the way ships drifted. It was climbing, hard and straight, with a wake behind it that bent the old listener's needle further than Osu had ever seen it bend. Whatever was coming, it was big, and it was fast, and it was aimed directly at Far Lantern. The dead band sang again, the slow, steady tone, then the careful words. "Daybreak Verdict to the relay you call Far Lantern. We have your position. We are coming up out of the deep current beneath your arm. We will break surface near your cluster in 11 minutes. Do not move your ships toward us. Hold the line you are holding. We need the space." 11 minutes. Osu looked at the wall of stopped sky. In 11 minutes, the Morn would reach the fourth ship in the cluster, the big Halu transport with 11,000 aboard. She sent that back. She sent the count. She sent the 11,000. The answer was immediate, and it was the first thing the Free Watch had said that was not gentle. Understood. We will be there first. Those 11 minutes were the longest Osu Marsh ever lived through, and she lived a very long life. She had nothing to do in them but watch the wall come and keep her voice steady for the cluster, and so she did both, and she learned in those 11 minutes exactly how much a keeper's voice could carry. On the refugee channel, she counted the distance down, not to frighten them, but to give the fear a shape, because a fear with a shape was a fear you could hold. 10 minutes, she sent. The ship is coming up from the deep. 9 minutes. It is faster than anything I have ever read on the listener. 8 minutes. Hold the cluster. Do not run. And all the while the wall of stopped sky crept toward the Halu transport. 800 kilometers an hour, never slowing. And inside that transport 11,000 people sat in the dark and listened to a keeper they had never met. Count down the distance between them and the silence. The Halu had a tender of their own, a young one, and at 6 minutes she came onto Osu's band, her signal thin and shaking, and asked the question Osu had no certain answer to. Will it reach us first, she sent. The wall, or the ship? Osu looked at the listener. The wall was 4 minutes from the Halu transport. The deep point that was the daybreak verdict was climbing hard, but the deep current it rode was long, and the math was close, closer than Osu wanted it to be, and she did not know the answer, and she would not lie to a frightened tender, because her people did not lie. I do not know, she sent, but I know the ship is coming, and I know it is fast, and I know it told me it would be there first. I have only known these people for 1 hour, but in 1 hour they have not said a single thing that was not true. Hold your people, keep them on the band. As long as you can hear my voice, the dark has not taken you. The Halu tender held, 11,000 people held. The wall crept closer, 3 minutes, 2, and on the listener, the daybreak verdict climbed, and Osu Marsh stopped counting down the wall and started counting down the ship, because she had decided, in those last minutes, what she would give the cluster to hold on to. Not the fear, the dawn. The ship is 1 minute out, she sent, on every band, to all 80,000. Whatever you are holding, hold it now. Something is about to come up out of the dark that this galaxy has not seen in 1,000 years. Listen, listen with everything you have. You are about to hear what a ship sounds like when it has decided that the silence stops here. And then, in the deep beneath the arm, the climbing point became a ship, and Osu Marsh stopped being able to think in ordinary words. It came up out of the dark current, the way a great sea creature comes up from under ice, not breaking the surface so much as bringing the surface with it, a wall of bent space rolling ahead of its prow. It was long, and it was lean, and it was the gray of old iron that had been used, and never once been allowed to rust. There were no soft lines on it anywhere. It was all edge and intention, a thing built by people who had decided a very long time ago exactly what a ship was for. Along its spine ran a single line of pale gold light, steady as a held note, and that light was the only warm thing about it, and it was the reason for the name, daybreak. The color of a sun coming up over a world that had been afraid all night. It was 4 kilometers long. Osu measured it on the slow listener, and did not believe the number, and measured it again. 4 kilometers of warship, rising out of the deep current, at a speed that should have torn any hull in the galaxy apart, and it did not so much as shudder. It came up clean and level and certain, and it slid into the gap between the refugee cluster and the wall of stopped sky as easily as a hand slides between a child and a closing door. The refugee channel had gone completely silent, not the dead silence of the morn. The other kind, the silence of 80,000 people seeing something none of them had words for. Then the daybreak verdict turned its prow toward the dark, and it spoke, and it did not speak on the dead band where Osu had found it. It spoke on every band at once, on all of them, loud enough that every ship and every soul in the cluster heard it in their bones, in the old trade tongue, in a voice that was calm, the way deep water is calm. This is the warship daybreak verdict, of the Free Watch. We are here at the call of the relay far lantern. The 40 ships behind us are under our protection. The wall in front of us stops here. On the refugee channel, 80,000 people made a sound Osu had never heard her own kind make. A rising note that was not a keen, and was not a cheer, but was something older than both. The old elder Hesh, who had told her she was reading them a story so they would die quiet, sent a single word back to her across the channel, and the word was, "Forgive me." From the third refugee hull, on the band Osu kept open for the children, a small voice reached her, and it was Lara, and she was not asking whether it would hurt anymore. "You called it," Lara said, and there was something in her voice that Osu had not heard from her since before the running started, since before the morn took their home moon, and their mother went out of reach. "You kept calling and it came." Osu could not answer her. She was the keeper, and the keeper did not weep on an open band, because a cluster that heard its keeper weep would lose the last steady thing it had, so she did the keeper's thing instead. She tightened her 4 hands on the cone, and she sent her sister the truest thing she had. "I did," she sent, "and I am going to keep calling. Stay close to the others. Tell them the keeper says the dark stops here." Down in the third hull, 9,000 children heard that the dark stopped here, and they passed it from one to the next, the way children pass a thing they have decided to believe. And the small, terrible keening that had filled the refugee channel since the Dren tender went silent, began, for the first time in 20 hours, to ease. Osu did not have time to hold the moment. The dead band was singing again, and this time it was for her alone. "Signal tender," the words said. "We have you marked as the one who called. What is your name?" "Osu," she sent. "Osu Marsh, tender of far lantern." "Osu Marsh," the words said, and there was that thing in them again, that warmth that her instruments could not measure. "Stay on this band. We are going to need your ears. You know this dark better than we do. You have been listening to it for 19 hours. We have been listening to it for 19 years. Between us, we should be able to read it well enough to break it." "Break it." Osu turned the word over. Across 100 systems and 1,000 years, no one had ever broken the morn. You ran. You went quiet. You were taken. There was no fourth thing. She sent that back, gently, the way you tell a brave stranger a hard truth. No one breaks the morn. It does not fight. It does not stop. It only comes. There was a pause on the dead band, and when the answer came, it carried something new, something Osu's old instruments finally could measure, because it bent the carrier wave the way a hard truth bends a voice. "We know what it does," the words said. "We have watched it do it for 19 years. We watched it take the first world we ever tried to save, and we were too slow, and we were too few, and we learned. The morn is not unbeatable, Osu Marsh. It is only patient, and we have spent 19 years learning to be patient back." The wall of stopped sky reached the place where the daybreak verdict waited, and for the first time in its long crawl across the galaxy, the morn met something that did not run. Osu watched it on the slow listener, and on her cone both, because the dark was a thing you felt with every sense at once. The wall did not slow. It rolled forward into the space the warship held, and where it touched the warship's bent space wake, the two pressures met and ground against each other, like two tides meeting in a narrow strait. The listener's needle screamed. The cone in Osu's hand went so cold she nearly let go of it, and the gold light along the warship's spine, the daybreak line, flared from a steady note into something brighter and harder, and held. The morn pushed. The daybreak verdict did not move. For 90 seconds, nothing in the galaxy moved. The wall pressed in, and the warship held the wall, and the gold line burned, and 80,000 people watched, and Osu Marsh forgot how to breathe. Then, slowly, the warship's prow began to glow, not gold, but a deep clean white, and Osu understood that the Free Watch had not come to hold the dark. They had come to push it back. This is the part the surviving records would argue about for generations, because no instrument the silenced peoples owned had ever measured what happened next, and the Velo who lived through it could only describe it in the language of sound. Osu Marsh described it as a chord. She said the warship sang a single chord into the dark, a low, full sound made of more notes than she could count, and that the chord did to the morn what a shout does to a held breath. It broke the silence's hold. The stopped sky in front of the daybreak verdict, the dead patch that gave back nothing, suddenly gave back something. Light, signal, sound. The dark, where the warship's cord touched it, remembered how to carry. The wall of the morn bent, not far, a few hundred meters, along a front, a few kilometers wide. But it bent backward, away from the cluster, for the first time in 1,000 years. And on the refugee channel, 80,000 people made the rising note again, louder, because they had just watched the impossible thing happen, and they had felt it in their bones. The dead band sang in Osu's ear. There, the words said, and the calm voice had something under it now, something fierce and glad. You felt that. Tell me you felt that. I felt it, Osu sent, and she realized her own signal was shaking, not with fear now, but with something she had no name for. You bent it. You bent the morn. A little, the words said. One ship can bend a little. That is the whole secret, Osu Marsh, and the Sable Quorum has spent 1,000 years making sure no one ever learned it. The morn is a silence, and a silence can be broken by enough sound, sent on exactly the right note, from exactly the right place. We have spent 19 years finding the note. One ship can hold a few kilometers of front. We did not come with one ship. Osu looked at the slow listener. And there, far down in the deep current beneath the arm, where the daybreak verdict had risen from, the trace was filling with rising points. Not one, not 10. The needle could not count them all. They climbed up out of the dark in a long ordered line, each one trailing its own wake of bent space, each one carrying its own line of gold light along its spine, and they came up around the daybreak verdict, like dawn coming up around the first star to brighten. This is the free watch, the warship said, on every band, to the whole frightened cluster and the whole silent dark beyond it. We are 60 ships. We have come up the deep current from 19 worlds the morn could not finish swallowing, worlds that held, worlds that called us the way you called us. We have spent 19 years learning the note, and tonight we are going to teach it to the dark. Osu Marsh, signal tender of Far Lantern, sat very still in her cramped deck, with the cone pressed to her head, and she watched 60 warships of a people she had never heard of, rise out of the deep, to fight the thing that had no enemies. And she did the only thing a keeper could do. She opened every band the relay held, and she carried the sound to her people, all 80,000 of them, so that not one soul in the cluster would face the dark without hearing the dawn come up. Bren Talo, the old keeper, put his hand on her shoulder. His voice when he spoke was thick with something she had never heard in him, in 300 seasons of making peace with the dark. I was wrong, he said, about the silence. You do not always have to make peace with it. Sometimes, he said, someone comes who knows the note. And below them, in the deep, the free watch finished rising, and the daybreak verdict turned its white burning prow fully toward the wall of stopped sky, and the gold line along its spine flared to its full brightness, and the dead band in Osu's ear carried 4 last words before the real fight began. Hold your people steady, the warship said. Watch what a question sounds like when the dark has refused to answer it for 1,000 years. The Sable Quorum did not have ears, and that, in the end, was why they lost. Osu Marsh did not know that yet. She only knew that the wall of stopped sky in front of the 60 warships had changed. For 1,000 years the morn had come as one flat tide, mindless and even, 800 kilometers an hour, never deviating. Now, for the first time, it was reacting. The flat wall puckered and drew inward along the front, where the daybreak verdict had bent it, the way a body flinches from a touch. Deep inside the silence, far behind the wall, the slow listener showed something Osu had never seen in 19 hours of watching, points of stillness so total, they read as holes in the trace. Those are the quorum, the dead band told her. The minds behind the morn. They do not ride at the front. They sit in the deepest silence, where nothing reaches them, and they push the dark outward the way you would push a held breath through a closed mouth. They have never had to come forward before. Nothing has ever made them. We are going to make them, the warship said. Then the free watch began to play. That was the only word Osu ever had for it, and she was the keeper, so it was her word that the records kept. The 60 warships did not fire weapons the way warmer species understood weapons. They sang. Each ship sent its own deep chord into the wall of stopped sky, and the chords were not the same, They were tuned, each ship a slightly different note, and where the notes met the dark, they did what the daybreak verdict alone had done, only 60-fold. The silence broke. In a front kilometers wide and kilometers deep, the morn remembered how to carry light and signal and sound, and the dark that had given back nothing for 1,000 years gave back everything at once. Osu felt it through the cone as a flood. For 19 hours the dark had been a wall of hiss. Now, where the Free Watch played, the dark was full of voices. She tried, in the years afterward, to describe to the warmer species how the Free Watch fought, and she never found a way that satisfied her, because there was no fire and no thunder, and nothing the seeing peoples could point to. What she settled on, in the end, was a thing her grandmother had told her as a child, about how the oldest Velo songs were sung. You did not sing over the silence, her grandmother had said. You sang into it. You found the exact shape of the quiet, the precise size and weight of it, and you made a sound that fit it perfectly. And where your sound and the silence met, the silence had nowhere left to be. That was what the 60 warships were doing. They were not blasting the dark apart. They were singing into it so precisely that the silence had nowhere left to be, and where each ship's note found the dark simply stopped being dark and remembered how to be a sky. The daybreak verdict took the center of the front, and the ships the dead band named to Osu spread out along the line on either side of it. The long answer on the left, the one that had broken the first spear, the open throat and the still calling beyond it. On the right, the late but coming, and the said we would, and a dozen more, each name a small fierce joke the Free Watch told against the galaxy that had once written them off. 60 ships, 60 names, 60 notes, and Osu Marsh learned every one of them in the span of the fight, because she was the keeper, and these were the ships that had answered, and a keeper kept the names of the ones who came. Osu felt the swallowed voices first as a pressure, and then as a flood. She did not understand at first. Then Brentalo, beside her, made a sound she had never heard an old keeper make, and she understood all at once, and it nearly stopped her heart. The voices were the swallowed. Every world the morn had hollowed, every signal it had stopped, every last broadcast of every silenced people, all of it was still there, frozen inside the silence, held but not erased. The morn had not destroyed the Sephrin and the Halu and the 100 peoples before them. It had only stopped their light from leaving, and now the Free Watch was breaking the silence open, and the swallowed voices were pouring back out into the galaxy. 1,000 years of last words and lullabies and distress calls and ordinary speech, all of it carried at once on the broken dark. Osu Marsh wept, in the way her people wept, which was a low, full tone from the chest, and she carried the voices to her cluster, and 80,000 refugees heard 1,000 years of the dead speak again, and the rising note they made was so loud it bent the cone in her hand. The dead band spoke gently in the middle of the flood. That is why they keep it a secret, the warship said. The Sable Quorum tells the galaxy the morn destroys. It does not. It silences. The Quorum rules a galaxy of held breath, and they have spent 1,000 years making sure no one ever learned that the silence could be broken. Because the moment one people learns the note, the whole thing comes apart. You cannot rule by silence once the silenced can speak. Then the wall of stopped sky struck back, and the fight became a fight. It came as a pressure, a great inward shove of dark that rolled forward against the singing warships all along the front. The Quorum had stopped flinching. Now they pushed, hard, the way they had pushed for 1,000 years, and the pressure of total silence rolled into the Free Watch's broken front and tried to close it again, to swallow the warships the way it had swallowed everything else. Osu watched the slow listener and saw the dark surge, and her heart climbed into her throat, because she had seen this surge before, smaller, when it took the Dren tender and the 900 farmers in a single heartbeat of nothing. The front warships took the surge head on, and they did not go quiet. This was the thing the Sable Quorum had never planned for, because it had never needed to. The morn silenced ships by stopping their signal, their light, their sound, everything that made them a ship and not a piece of drifting iron. But the Free Watch hulls were not built like other hulls. The gold line along each spine was not decoration. It was a source, a sound the ship made from inside itself, a note it sang whether or not the dark allowed it to carry, and the dark could not stop a sound that began inside the very thing it was trying to silence. The surge rolled over the front warships, and the front warships kept singing from the inside, and the silence broke against them like a wave against a stone that hums. "Hold the note," the daybreak verdict said, "on every band," and the gold lines along 60 spines flared as one. "Hold it. They cannot silence a song they are inside of." The surge broke. Osu watched it on the listener, the great inward shove losing its shape, fraying. The dark that had never once failed to swallow a ship failing now, against 60 hulls that sang from the inside. And in the gap where the surge had spent itself, the Free Watch pushed forward, into the morn, into the held silence, toward the stillness holes where the sable quorum sat. The quorum did not let them push for free. As the front warships drove forward, the dark gathered itself into spears, thin, hard lances of total silence, that came not as a wall now, but as strikes, aimed, one at a time, at the singing ships. Osu watched on the listener as the first spear leapt from the deep dark toward a Free Watch hull on the left flank, a ship the dead band named to her as the Long Answer. And she could not warn it in time, and she did not have to. The Long Answer heard the spear coming, the way a listening people hears everything, and it turned its prow into the strike, and met the silence with its own note, and the spear of dark broke against the ship's song, and scattered, and was gone. The Long Answer did not slow. It kept singing, it kept driving forward. This was the thing about the Free Watch, that Osu Marsh would never quite be able to explain to the warmer species afterward, no matter how many times she told it. The warship did not take the wound. There was no wound to take. The quorum's whole power was silence, and a silence could only be aimed at a thing that could be made quiet, and the Free Watch had built their hulls around a sound that began on the inside and could not be reached. The dark threw spear after spear, and ship after ship met them and broke them and kept singing, and not one Free Watch hull went quiet, because the one weapon the sable quorum had spent 1,000 years perfecting was the one weapon these ships were built to be deaf to. The quorum threw the dark at the cluster instead. Osu saw it on the listener half a heartbeat before it happened, a spear of silence breaking away from the front and arcing back, around the warships, toward the refugee ships, toward the big Halu transport with 11,000 aboard, toward the third hull where Lara was. Osu's whole body went cold. She opened her mouth to send a warning that would do nothing, because the transport had no song to meet the spear with, no gold line, no way to break a silence aimed at its heart. She never sent it. The daybreak verdict was already there. It had heard the spear break from the front, the same instant Osu had, and it had moved, 4 kilometers of warships sliding between the spear and the cluster, faster than the listener could draw it, and it took the strike of total silence on its own flank, and broke it on its own song, and held its place, between the dark and the children, the way it had promised it would. "The 40 ships behind us are under our protection," it had said. "The wall in front of us stops here." It had meant it as a fact, not a promise. And now, Osu understood the difference. A promise could be broken. A fact could only be proven, over and over, every time the dark tried to get past it. "Stay behind us," the daybreak verdict said, on the children's band, in a voice Osu had not heard it used before, lower, gentler, a voice for the third hull and the 9,000. "Nothing reaches you, not while we are between you and the dark. That is what we are for." Lara, on the children's band, sent back 2 words, and they steadied the whole hull. "We know." The surge of dark fell away from the cluster, beaten, and the Free Watch pushed on, deeper into the morn, toward the stillness holes where the sable quorum sat. That was when the quorum did the thing that told Osu Marsh they were finally afraid. They spoke. In 1,000 years, by every record the silenced peoples kept, the sable quorum had never once sent a signal. They ruled by silence. They did not explain, did not threaten, did not bargain. Silence was their whole language, and now, for the first time, they broke it, and the thing they sent rolled out of the deepest dark and across every band at once, the way the daybreak verdict had spoken, but cold, so cold, a voice with no warmth in it anywhere. "Stop," it said. "You are unmaking a peace that has held for 1,000 years. The silence is mercy. Listen to what you are letting back into the galaxy. War, grief, noise, 10,000 peoples shouting over one another. We ended that. We gave the galaxy quiet. Stop your ships, or we will show you what the silence holds back. Osu Marsh, signal tender, heard the cold voice and felt the old fear rise, because part of her had wondered the same thing in 19 dark hours. Maybe the silence was easier. Maybe the dark was a mercy. Maybe it was better to go quiet than to keep calling into a galaxy that never answered. Then the daybreak verdict answered the sable quorum, on every band, in front of the swallowed voices and the 80,000 refugees and the whole listening dark, and Osu Marsh stopped being afraid, and stayed that way for the rest of her long life. You did not give the galaxy quiet, the warship said. You took its voice. Those are not the same thing, and a people who cannot hear the difference is exactly the people who should never have been allowed to rule. You call the silence mercy. We have spent 19 years listening to what your mercy holds. Mothers singing to children, last words sent to people who never heard them. A whole galaxy of speech frozen the instant before it arrived. That is not peace. That is a hand held over 1,000 mouths, and you have held it so long you have convinced yourself the mouths wanted it. The gold lines flared, 60 warships sang one chord, and the chord was aimed not at the wall now, but past it, deep, at the stillness holes where the quorum sat. We are the free watch, the daybreak verdict said. We are the ones who did not go quiet. 19 worlds called for help, and 19 worlds were answered, and now they crew these ships, and we have come a long way down a deep current to tell you one thing. The silence ends tonight, not because we hate quiet, because the galaxy gets to choose its own quiet, and you took the choice, and we are giving it back. Then the free watch drove into the heart of the morn, and the dark, for the first time in 1,000 years, gave ground. Osu followed the drive on the slow listener, and what she saw she would carry the rest of her life. The 60 warships moved into the deepest silence in a long curved line, the daybreak verdict at its point, and around each hull the dark peeled back the way a wound peels open, exposing what the quorum had spent 1,000 years hiding behind the wall. Worlds. Not graves. Worlds. Dozens of them, hundreds, hung in the deep silence like beads on a string the quorum had pulled tight, each one a place that had once been alive, and that the morn had wrapped in stillness and tucked away in the dark to keep. The silence rulers had not destroyed the galaxy they conquered. They had collected it. They had pulled 1,000 years of living worlds into the deep, and held them quiet, and called it peace. And the Free Watch was driving through the middle of that hidden horde now, singing the silence off of world after world as they passed. And on the listener, Osu watched the held worlds light up one after another, remembering how to shine. The stillness holes grew closer. There were 9 of them, the dead band told her. 9 cold, deep points where the sable quorum sat. 9 minds that had held the galaxy quiet between them for longer than any living record. They did not move as the Free Watch came. They had never had to move. They had spent 1,000 years certain that nothing in the galaxy could reach them, because nothing in the galaxy could carry a sound through their silence. And now 60 ships were carrying a sound right into the heart of it, a sound that began on the inside, a sound the dark could not touch. And for the first time in their long cold reign, the 9 minds of the quorum understood that the one thing they had built their whole power on had a crack in it, and the crack had a name, and the name was the Free Watch. The dark threw everything it had left at the 9 stillness holes' edge. Not spears now. The wall itself, drawn in tight, a last shell of total silence wrapped around the quorum, the way a hand closes into a fist. The Free Watch met it the only way they knew how. They stopped driving, and they planted themselves at the edge of the fist, and they sang, all 60 of them, the gold lines flaring to a brightness Osu had not yet seen, and the note they sang was not aimed at breaking the shell. It was aimed at filling it. They poured the lost world note into the closed fist of silence, until there was no quiet left inside it anywhere, until the 9 minds at the center were surrounded not by the silence they had always hidden in, but by the one sound in the galaxy they could not stop, the sound of a people who had refused to die, singing their murdered home into the dark. That was when the 9 minds, surrounded by a sound they could not silence, reached for the last thing left to them, and the dark gathered itself one final time for the move that would either drown the galaxy or end the quorum forever. Osu carried it all to her people. She had stopped being only a tender hours ago and had become something else, the voice that connected the cluster to the fight, the keeper, who held 80,000 frightened souls steady by letting them hear every moment of the dawn coming up. She read the listener. She read the cone. She read the broken dark full of returning voices, and she sent it all out across every band the relay held, and the cluster held, because she held, and because for the first time in any of their lives the dark was losing. The wall of stopped sky in front of Far Lantern, the wall that had been 40 minutes from the next ship, stopped advancing. Then it began to recede, slowly at first, then faster, the dark pulling back from the cluster as the Free Watch drove deeper into it, and the space the morn surrendered came alive again, full of light and signal, and the voices of the swallowed, a tide of dawn rolling outward from 60 singing ships. Bren Talo, the old keeper, watched the dark recede from the relay he had kept lit for 300 seasons, and he made the soft clicking sound his people made, and he said the only thing left to say. "In all my life," he said, "I never thought I would hear the silence lose." But the Sable Quorum was not finished. They had ruled a galaxy for 1,000 years, and they had one thing left, the thing they had never had to use, and as the Free Watch drove toward the stillness holes at the heart of the dark, the Quorum reached for it, and the slow listener showed Osu Marsh a new trace, rising from the deepest silence, vast and cold and growing, and the dead band in her ear carried the daybreak verdict's voice, no longer calm, sharp now, urgent, fast. "They are pulling it all back," the warship said. "Every silence they hold, across the whole galaxy. They are going to release it at once, here, against us. All of it. 1,000 years of stopped sky in a single wall. Osu Marsh, listen to me. We need your relay. We need every band Far Lantern can reach. We are about to do the thing we came 19 years to do, and we cannot do it alone. Tell me," Osu sent, and her signal did not shake at all. "Tell me what to do." The plan was so simple that Osu Marsh almost did not believe it, and that was how she knew it was true, because the deepest things were always simple once someone had spent 19 years finding them. The morn was a silence. The Free Watch broke silences with sound, sent on exactly the right note, from exactly the right place. 60 warships could break a front, a few hundred kilometers wide, but the Sable Quorum was about to pull 1,000 years of held silence into one wall and drop it on the cluster all at once, and 60 ships, however well they sang, could not break a wall that size. There was not enough sound in 60 hulls. But there was enough sound in the galaxy. There always had been. It was just frozen, held, stopped inside the dark. 1,000 years of swallowed voices, every last word of every silenced people, all of it, waiting inside the silence the Quorum was about to throw. And the daybreak verdict had spent 19 years learning that a silence full of held voices could be made to break itself, if you gave the voices back their note all at once, from a place loud enough and old enough to reach the whole dark. A place like a relay. A place like Far Lantern, which had been built 10,000 years ago by a people now long gone, to reach across an entire spiral arm, and which still held every band the galaxy had ever used. "We cannot reach the whole dark from our hulls," the daybreak verdict said, on the dead band, fast and clear. "We are too small and too few. But your relay was built to reach the whole arm. If we feed our note into Far Lantern, and you carry it out on every band at once, we do not break a front. We break the silence everywhere it is being pulled from. We turn their own wall against them. Every voice they ever swallowed sings at once. Can your relay carry that?" Osu looked at Bren Talo. The old keeper had already understood. He was at the relay's deep core, his hands moving over instruments older than his 300 seasons, opening doors in the ancient machine that had not been opened in living memory. "It can carry it," he said. "It was built to carry the whole arm speaking at once. 10,000 years ago, before it was a way station, this was a voice. It has only ever been a whisper, because no one ever gave it anything worth shouting. Give it to us," Osu sent. "Feed it your note. Far Lantern will carry it." She had one more thing to do before the wall came, and it was the keeper's truest work, so she did it without being asked. She opened the refugee channel to all 40 ships and 80,000 souls, and she told them the truth, plainly, the way her people told children the truth, because a people who could not trust your voice had nothing left to trust. The quorum is about to do the worst thing it can do, she sent. It is going to pull 1,000 years of silence into one wall and throw it at us. All at once. You are going to feel the dark come closer than it has ever come. You are going to feel it reach for you. I need you to do the hardest thing a frightened people can do, which is to hold still and trust a voice you have only known for one day. Do not run. There is nowhere to run that the Free Watch cannot already reach, and running will only scatter you where they cannot protect you. Stay in the cluster, stay on this band, keep your children close, and keep listening to me, because I am going to stay on this band through the whole of it, and as long as you can hear my voice, the dark has not taken you. The channel was quiet for a moment. Then the old elder Hesh, who had told her at the start that she was reading them a story so they would die quiet, sent his answer, and his voice had changed in 20 hours, as much as the galaxy had. Keeper, he said. At the start I called your hope a story. I was an old fool who had buried too many worlds to believe in dawn. I am 1,100 seasons old, and I have run from the morn my whole life, and tonight, for the first time, I watched it run from us. Whatever you ask, the cluster will do it. We trust your voice. Send your note into the dark, and we will hold. 80,000 voices on the refugee channel sent back the same thing. In the rising note Osu had come to know, and the note meant, we are listening, and it meant, we will hold, and it meant, in the deepest place the velo kept their meanings, we are not alone. Then the sable quorum dropped the wall. It came the way nothing had ever come. 1,000 years of stopped sky released at once. A tide of total silence so vast, the slow listener's needle pinned itself against the edge of the trace, and stayed there. It rolled toward the cluster and the relay and the 60 warships, and it was not 800 kilometers an hour anymore. It was everything the quorum had, all of it, all at once, the last move of a power that had ruled by silence for 1,000 years, and would rather drown the galaxy than let the silence break. The Free Watch did not run. The daybreak verdict turned its prow to face the oncoming wall, and the other 59 ships formed up around it, and 60 gold lines flared as one, and 60 deep cords poured not outward this time but inward, into the daybreak verdict, into a single point at the heart of the gold line along its spine, building, gathering, until the warship was not singing a chord, it was holding one, the whole Free Watch's voice compressed into one note waiting to be released. Then the daybreak verdict sent that note to Far Lantern. It came down the dead band into Osu Marsh's relay like a sun pouring into a cup, and for one terrible instant, Osu thought the old machine would break, that 10,000 years of waiting had made it too brittle to shout. The relay groaned. The deep core howled. Brentalo's hands flew over the ancient instruments, holding the old machine together by knowledge alone, and Osu Marsh did the one thing only she could do, the thing 19 hours of listening had made her ready for. She aimed it. She knew this dark. She had listened to it for 19 hours, and her people had listened to it for 1,000 years. And she knew every band the morn used to pull its silence through, every channel the quorum held, every frequency where the swallowed voices were frozen. The daybreak verdict had the note. The relay had the reach. But only a tender who had spent her whole life inside this silence knew exactly where to send it. Osu Marsh opened every band Far Lantern held, 10,000 years of channels singing at once, and she pointed the Free Watch's note straight down every frequency the silence was pulling from, and she released it into the whole dark. The galaxy spoke. There was no other way to say it, and Osu never tried. The relay sang the Free Watch's note into every band at once, across the whole spiral arm, and the note reached the silence everywhere the quorum was pulling it from, and 1,000 years of swallowed voices remembered, all at once, how to carry, not in a front, not in a patch, everywhere, every world the morn had ever hollowed, every signal it had ever stopped, every last word of every silenced people across 1,000 years, and 100 peoples, all of it broke free in a single instant and sang. The wall of total silence the quorum had dropped on the cluster met the whole galaxy's voice rising to meet it, and it did not swallow the voice. The voice swallowed it. Osu Marsh watched the slow listener and could not understand what she was seeing, because the trace had never been built to show a thing like this. The vast wall of silence simply came apart, dissolving from the inside, as the voices it held tore free of it. 1,000 years of stopped sky, breaking into light and signal, and sound all at once, rolling outward across the arm, faster than the listener could follow. The dark did not retreat. It ended. Where the morn had been, there was the galaxy again, full of light and full of voices, loud and living and free. And in the deepest silence, where the sable quorum had sat untouched for 1,000 years, the stillness holes filled with sound for the first time, and the cold minds that had ruled by silence heard, all at once, every voice they had ever stopped. They could not bear it. They had no ears, and so the sound did not deafen them. It did something worse. It reached the place where they had convinced themselves the silence was mercy, and it filled that place with 1,000 years of the speech they had stopped. Mothers and children, and last words and lullabies, all of it true, all of it real, all of it the thing they had told themselves did not matter. The sable quorum had ruled a galaxy of held breath, and now the breath was let go, all at once, in their own deepest dark, and there was nowhere left in the galaxy quiet enough for them to hide from what they had done. The dead band carried the daybreak verdict's voice, and it was quiet now, and tired, and something else, something that took Osu a moment to name, because she had never heard it from the Free Watch before. Grief, not for themselves, for the dark they had just opened, and everything it had held. "It is done," the warship said. "Listen." Osu listened. The dark was gone. In its place, across the whole arm, the galaxy was speaking. 1,000 years of voices, freed all at once, finding each other across the broken silence. The Sephrin, and the Halu, and the 100 peoples the morn had taken, their last words rolling out across a galaxy that could finally hear them. And under it all, threaded through every band, a new sound rising, the sound of the living calling out to one another now that the dark was gone. World to world, ship to ship, voice to voice. 10,000 peoples discovering all at once that they were not alone, and never had been, only silenced. The sable quorum sent one last signal. Osu caught it on the dead band, a thread of the cold voice, frayed now, broken, the silence rulers speaking for the second and last time in 1,000 years. "What have you done?" it said. "The galaxy will never be quiet again." The daybreak verdict answered it, gently, the way you answer something that is ending. "No," the warship said. "It will not. It will be loud, and it will argue, and it will grieve, and it will sing, and sometimes it will be unbearable. That is what a galaxy with a voice sounds like. We did not give it peace. We gave it back its noise. The peace it can find for itself, now that it gets to choose. You never let it choose. That was the whole crime. Not the silence. The choosing. Taken away." And then the Free Watch did the thing that Osu Marsh would tell her grandchildren about, the thing that finally made her understand who these people were. They did not destroy the sable quorum. They did not hollow the silence rulers the way the silence rulers had hollowed 100 peoples. The 60 warships gathered around the stillness holes where the quorum sat, broken and exposed, and surrounded by the voices of everyone they had ever stopped. And the daybreak verdict spoke one more time, to them alone. "You will live," the warship said. "You will live in the galaxy you silenced, and you will hear it. Every day, every voice, every word, you spent 1,000 years stopping. That is not mercy, and it is not revenge. It is the truth you ran from. You will live inside it now. The galaxy will decide what to do with you. The whole galaxy, every voice you ever took, together. Not us. We only opened the door." While the warship spoke to the broken quorum, Osu Marsh did the thing she had not let herself do in 11 days. She turned every band Far Lantern held toward the place where her home moon had been, the moon the morn had taken first, the moon where her mother had stopped answering 11 days ago, and she sent her mother's name into the newly living dark. For a long, terrible moment there was nothing, and Osu thought, this is the cruelty of it, that the dark gives the voices back but not the people, that she would hear her mother's last words frozen and free now, and would have to live the rest of her life knowing they were last words. Then the band carried something back. Not a recording. Not a frozen last word held in the silence. A voice. Living. Tired. 11 days older and 11 days more frightened. Asking the dark the same question Osu had been asking it for 19 hours. Is anyone listening? Osu Marsh, keeper of Far Lantern, who had not wept on an open band in 19 hours, because a keeper held the cluster steady, put her face down against the cone, and made the low, full sound her people made when grief and joy came at once. And she sent her mother 4 words across a galaxy that could finally carry them. I am, she sent. I am. Her mother had not been taken. The morn had silenced her moon, stopped its signal, sealed it inside the dark. But it had not destroyed it, because the morn destroyed nothing. It only silenced. And now the silence was broken, and the moon was calling, and her mother was alive on it, 11 days hungry, and afraid, and alive. All across the spiral arm, in that same moment, the same impossible thing was happening, 80,000 times over, 100 million times over, 10,000 peoples discovering that the worlds they had grieved were not graves, but only rooms, where the door had been held shut, and the door was open now, and the people behind it were calling out, and being heard. That was the thing the Sable Quorum had never reckoned with. They had ruled by convincing the galaxy that the silenced were the dead, but the silenced were not dead, they were only waiting. And a galaxy that learns its dead were only waiting does not grieve. It comes back to life, all at once, in a single roar of voices, and there is no power old enough or cold enough to silence a sound like that a second time. Then the Free Watch turned from the deep dark, their work done, the silence broken across a whole spiral arm, and they came back up the broken sky toward the cluster of 40 ships and 80,000 souls that had called for help and, for the first time in 1,000 years, been answered. For a long time after the dark ended, Osu Marsh could not let go of the listening cone. She had held it for 19 hours of silence, and then through the whole breaking of the dark, and her hand had forgotten how to be anything but a hand holding a cone, listening. Brentalo gently took it from her, the way you take a thing from someone who has held it too long, and he set it down, and the two of them sat in the cramped signal deck of Far Lantern and listened to a galaxy they had never heard before. It was loud. The old keeper had been right about that. Across the whole spiral arm the voices were coming alive, world to world, and the relay carried all of it, every band singing at once, a galaxy remembering how to speak. It was not orderly, it was not peaceful, not yet. It was 1,000 peoples calling out at the same time, frightened and joyful and grieving and confused, 10,000 years of held breath let go all at once. It was the most beautiful sound Osu Marsh had ever heard, and she understood now why the Free Watch had risked everything for it. A galaxy with a voice was a galaxy that was alive. Brentalo sat at the deep core of the relay and listened to it with his old face turned up, the way a keeper listened, and Osu watched him do a thing she had never seen him do in the years she had known him. He named the worlds. As each silenced people came back onto the bands, the old keeper said its name aloud, soft, to himself. The way you greet someone you had given up for dead, the Sephron. He had watched them go quiet 140 seasons ago, and now their band was full of voices, alive, calling. The Halu. He had heard the Halu drift go silent with his own ears, had carried the grief of it for 90 seasons, and now the Halu were on the band, asking the dark if anyone could hear them, and Brentalo answered them himself, on Far Lantern's strongest band. We hear you, the drift is found, and the Halu band broke into a sound that needed no translation in any tongue. He named worlds Osu had never heard of, worlds taken before her grandmother was born, peoples she had thought were only stories the old keepers told. They were all there, every one. 1,000 years of the silenced, none of them dead, all of them only waiting behind a door that the Free Watch had finally torn off its hinges, and now the door was open, and they were pouring back into the galaxy, and the old keeper sat at his core and named them as they came, and his voice was steady the whole time, except when it was not. And then, threaded under all of it, on a band Osu had not known the relay still held, the oldest band of all, came a single note that did not belong to any of the worlds Brentalo knew. It was the gold line. It was the Free Watch's own lost world, the home they had carried for 19 years, as a weapon and a wound, calling at last out of the silence that had taken it. Osu had heard that note all through the fight, sung by 60 ships into the dark, and she had thought it was theirs to give. She understood now that it had never been only a weapon. It was a question they had been asking the dark for 19 years. Are you still there? And tonight, for the first time, The dark answered, and the answer was yes. And somewhere out past the broken sky, a people that everyone in the galaxy had written off 19 years ago was waking up to find that the children who fled had never stopped calling, and had come back, and had brought the dawn. The daybreak verdict came up alongside the relay, 4 kilometers of gray iron, with its gold line burning low and steady now, the daybreak settling into morning. The dead band sang, and the careful voice came through, tired and warm. Osu Marsh, it said, tender of Far Lantern, we owe you the truth, the way we promised it at the start. May we come aboard your relay? There is something we want you to see. They came aboard. Osu had imagined them 100 different ways across the hours, the people who sang Silence is Open, and she had imagined them tall and terrible and strange. They were strange, but they were not terrible. They were a people built low and broad, with wide, patient faces, and 4 steady hands each, and their eyes were closed, all of them, sealed over with skin, and Osu understood with a jolt that ran all the way down through her. They were blind. The Free Watch could not see. They had never seen. They lived, like the Velo, by sound and by signal, by the bend of the world against the ear, and that was why they had heard the morn, when the warmer species only saw a dark they could run from. That was why they had spent 19 years learning the note. The seeing peoples of the galaxy had looked at the silence and seen nothing, and run. The Free Watch had listened to it, and heard everything, and stayed. The one who came forward was their captain, a broad old soul named Tovan Keel, and Tovan Keel found Osu Marsh by the sound of her breathing, and reached out with one of those 4 steady hands, and laid it against the side of her head, where her people heard, the gentlest greeting one listening people could give another. You called, Tovan Keel said, in the old trade tongue, the words rough in a mouth not built for them. 19 hours, on a dead band, into a galaxy that everyone told you had stopped answering. You did not stop. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know how many peoples we have lost because they stopped calling 1 hour too soon? I did not think anyone was listening, Osu said. We are always listening, Tovan Keel said. That is the whole of what we are. 19 years ago the Morn took the first world we tried to save, and we were too slow and too few and we failed, and we made ourselves a promise over that silenced world. We would learn the note, however long it took, and we would never again let a people go quiet for want of an answer. So we listen to every dead band in the galaxy. And one day, a tender on a relay nobody remembered, on a band nobody used, sent 4 words into the dark, and we heard them. Come fast, you said. So we came fast. Tell me about the first world, Osu said, the one you failed to save. She did not ask it to wound. She asked it because she was a keeper, and a keeper kept the true story, and she could feel that this was the story the rest of it grew out of. Tovan Keel was quiet for a moment, and the quiet was the kind her own people understood, the quiet of a listening soul reaching back for something it had carried a long way. It was our own, the captain said at last. The first world the Morn took, 19 years ago, was ours. Our home. We are the Free Watch now, but before that, we were just a people, on a world at the edge of the dark, and we heard the silence coming the way your people heard it, before anyone else, in our bones. We sent for help. We called every band we had, and the galaxy did to us exactly what it did to you. It heard a small people calling about a dark no one could fight, and it decided we were already lost, and it went quiet, and it left us to the Morn. We did not all go quiet, Tovan Keel said. 60 ships got out, the night the dark closed over our world. 60 hulls of survivors, listening to our own home go silent behind us, hearing the last voices freeze inside the silence. Our families, our children, our whole world held in the dark and unreachable. And we made the promise then, in the worst hour any people ever knows, the hour you learn no help is coming. We swore that what was done to us would not be done to anyone else, while we still had a hull and a voice. We could not save our world. It was already inside the dark. But we could learn how to break the dark, and we could spend the rest of our lives making sure that the next people who called would be answered. So that is what the gold line is, Osu said softly. The sound from inside. That is what the gold line is, Tovan Keel said. It is the note of our world. The last sound it ever made before the silence took it, recorded by the 60 ships that got out, carried for 19 years. learned and tuned and turned into the one thing the dark cannot silence. Every ship of the Free Watch sings our lost home into the dark, and the dark cannot stop it, because it is already inside us. We carry our dead world as a weapon against the thing that took it, and tonight, Osu Marsh, when we broke the silence across the whole arm, the first voice that came back out of the dark, the first voice to remember how to carry, was our own. Our world is still in there, still waiting, still calling. And now we can hear it again. Osu Marsh, who had been a keeper for 40 seasons and had never once been thanked for it, found she could not speak. Tovan Keel took her silence the way one listening people takes another's, which is to say, completely, and went on. The galaxy will change now, the captain said. It is already changing. 1,000 peoples just learned they were not destroyed, only silenced, and they are finding each other across the whole arm. There will be a great deal of grief, 1,000 years of it, all at once. And there will be confusion, and old fights waking up, and the hard work of a galaxy learning to live loud again after 1,000 years of forced quiet. We did not give them peace, Osu Marsh. We were honest about that. We gave them back the noise, and the choosing is hard. But it is theirs now. That is the whole of what we fought for. What happens to you? Osu asked. To the Free Watch. We listen, Tovan Keel said simply. We go back down the deep current, and we listen, the way we always have. Somewhere in the galaxy, right now, a people is going quiet that does not have to. A dead band is carrying 4 words into a dark that everyone says has stopped answering. We will hear them, and we will come. You could stay, Osu said. The galaxy you just freed. They would make you its rulers. They would build you a throne out of every voice you gave back. Tovan Keel made a sound that Osu's people would have recognized anywhere, a low, broad sound from the chest, the listening people's way of laughing. That is exactly why we will not stay, the captain said. The Sable Quorum took the galaxy's voice, because they were certain they knew best what the galaxy should hear. We will not become the next certain ones. We broke one silence. That does not make us wise enough to rule the noise. The galaxy gets to choose, Osu Marsh. All of it, every voice, together. We only ever open the door. The walking through, that part is theirs. Then the captain of the Free Watch did one last thing, and it was the thing that Osu Marsh carried with her for the rest of her long life. Longer than Brentalos. Long enough to tell it 10,000 times to a galaxy that never stopped wanting to hear it. Tovan Keel reached into the broad chest of the captain's coat and drew out a small flat instrument, old and worn, a thing the size of a hand, with a single band channel set into its face. The captain pressed it into Osu Marsh's 4 hands. This is a listening stone, Tovan Keel said. Every ship of the Free Watch carries one. It does only one thing. It listens to the dead bands. All of them. All the time. The bands no living people use. The bands where the dying call, when they think no one is left to hear. When one of them carries a voice, the stone wakes, and it tells you where, and how many, and how long they have. We have 60 of these on 60 ships, the captain said. Now there are 61. You kept a relay lit on a dead band for a galaxy that everyone told you had stopped answering, and you did not stop. And because you did not stop, 80,000 people are alive, and 1,000 peoples have their voice back. That is what a Free Watch is, Osu Marsh, not the ships, not the note, the not stopping. We would be honored if Far Lantern would listen with us. Osu Marsh held the listening stone in her 4 hands, and she understood that the galaxy that came up out of this dark would not be the galaxy that went into it. It would be loud and hard and free, and somewhere in it, always, there would be a people going quiet who did not have to, and a dead band carrying 4 words into a dark that everyone said had stopped answering. And now, when those words came, they would not fall into silence. They would wake a stone on a relay called Far Lantern, and a tender would hear them, and the tender would send the dawn. I will listen, Osu Marsh said. She did not know yet how completely those 3 words would remake the rest of her life, but she would learn, and the learning would be the best thing that ever happened to her. In the seasons that followed, Far Lantern stopped being a forgotten way station on a dead arm, and became the first thing the freed galaxy had built that was new. Osu Marsh sat at its core with the listening stone beside her cone, and she listened to the dead bands the way the Free Watch had taught her, and the stone woke more often than she had ever imagined it would. because a galaxy coming back to life after 1,000 years of silence is a galaxy with a great many small dark corners that have not yet heard that the dark can be broken. The first time the stone woke for her, 8 seasons after the night the dawn came up, it was a people she had never heard of, on the far edge of the freed arm, where a last pocket of the old silence still clung to 3 small worlds the Free Watch had not yet reached. A tender on one of those worlds, frightened and certain no one was listening, sent a call down a dead band into a dark that everyone had told her had stopped answering, and the stone woke on Far Lantern, and it told Osu Marsh where, and how many, and how long they had. And Osu did the thing she had promised the captain she would do. She did not send the dawn herself, because she had no warship, and no note, and no gold line. She did the thing she could do, the thing that was, in the end, the whole of what a watch was for. She answered. She opened the band, and she sent the frightened tender on the far world the truest words she had, the words that had once been sent to her, across a dead band, in the worst hour her people ever knew. "We heard you," she sent. "Hold your position. Help is coming." And then she sent the call on, down into the deep current, to the 60 warships of a blind and patient people who never stopped listening, and the Free Watch heard, and the Free Watch came, and 3 more small worlds that had been told no help was coming learned, the way Osu Marsh had learned, that the galaxy had changed, and that somewhere a stone was always awake, and that the dark did not get to have the last word anymore. That was the chain the Free Watch had started without ever quite meaning to. Each people that was answered learned how to answer, and the watch grew, world by world, stone by stone, voice by voice, until the dead bands that had carried nothing but the dying for 1,000 years were full of one message, sent and answered and sent again, across the whole living arm. "We heard you. Hold. Help is coming." The Free Watch went back down into the deep current, the way they had come, 60 warships with their gold lines burning low and steady, sliding down beneath the spiral arm to wait in the dark for the next 4 words from the next dead band. The daybreak verdict was the last to go. It hung beside the relay for a long moment, 4 kilometers of gray iron, and 1 line of dawn-colored light, and the dead band carried one final message. Not the captain's voice this time, but the ship's own. The calm, deep voice that had spoken to a frightened tender, 20 hours, and a whole galaxy ago. "You asked me, at the start, how many ships were coming," the warship said, "and whether one ship could stand against the morn. Do you remember?" "I remember," Osu sent. "Here is the true answer," the daybreak verdict said. "It was never about how many ships. The Sable Quorum had a whole galaxy of silence, and we had 60 hulls, and 1 relay, and 1 tender who would not stop calling. We did not win because we had more. We won because you would not go quiet, and because we would not stop listening, and because between the 2 of those things, there is no dark in any galaxy that can hold. Remember that, Osu Marsh, the next time the sky goes silent and everyone tells you no help is coming." "Help is always coming," the warship said. "Someone just has to keep calling until it gets there." Then the daybreak verdict turned its prow toward the deep, and the gold line along its spine flared once, bright as a sun cresting a world that had been afraid all night, and it slid down into the dark current and was gone. Osu Marsh stood at the heart of Far Lantern, with the listening stone in her 4 hands, and Bren Talo beside her, and around them, the relay carried a galaxy learning how to speak again, 1,000 peoples finding each other across a broken silence, loud and grieving, and joyful and free. It was not peace. The Free Watch had been honest about that. It was something harder and better than peace. It was a galaxy with its voice back, and the right to choose what to do with it. Far out past the cluster, the first of the freed worlds were already beginning to call to one another, world to world, the way the Free Watch had taught without ever meaning to teach, sending their names into the dark and leaving the channel open, the way you call when you finally believe someone is listening. Bren Talo, the old keeper, who had spent 300 seasons making peace with the dark, listened to the galaxy come alive and made the soft clicking sound his people made, and there was no resignation left in it at all. "I was wrong," he said again, "the last and truest time. The sky does not have to go quiet, not ever. Not while someone is still keeping the band lit." Osu Marsh set the listening stone into the heart of Far Lantern, beside the cone she had held for 19 hours, and she opened every band the old relay held, and she sent her own voice out into the loud and living galaxy, the first message of a new watch on an old relay, at the inner lip of a freed spiral arm. "This is Far Lantern," she sent, on every band, to anyone, to everyone, to the whole galaxy that could finally hear. "We are listening. If the dark ever comes for you, and everyone tells you no help is coming, send your voice down the dead bands and do not stop. Someone is listening now. Someone will always be listening now. Help is coming," she sent. "Keep calling until it gets there." And out in the deep, beneath a spiral arm that had its voice back at last, 60 warships of a blind and patient people listened to a tender keep her promise, and they settled in to wait, and the gold lines along their spines burned low and steady in the dark, like the first thin light of a morning that the galaxy had been told, for 1,000 years, would never come. It came anyway. It always does. Someone just has to keep calling.